The trap set will always be available for free, but we rely on donations from our listeners. Please visit our website at thetrapset.net and click donate. Subscribe to our show on iTunes, and if you enjoy what you hear, give us a review.
This is Joe Wong. Welcome to The Trap Set, where each week we explore the lives of drummers. I want to play something for you. You're hearing Compliant by Shellac, featuring my guest, Todd Trainer, on drums. Formed in 1992, Shellac records and tours on its own timetable, resulting in a consistently excellent body of work and a devoted following. Some have classified Trainer's style as primal, perhaps because of the visceral energy he emits. But in a band that thrives on minimalism, Todd's every note feels deliberate and personal. He delivers brilliantly composed parts with a uniquely elegant lope. Aside from Shellac, Todd has played drums in the bands Breaking Circus and Rifle Sport. He's also released 3 albums as Bricklayer Cake, his solo project for which he plays all the instruments. Over the past year and a half, he's also begun teaching drum lessons. I spoke to Todd last year in his hometown, Minneapolis.
Stove off. Compliant.
And now our conversation with Todd Trainer.
My father was he's a bit of a smooth talker and a very charming gentleman.
So a salesman?
A salesman. They brought him out of the truck and into the world of sales, where he was just always a natural, but a natural in a very genuine and sincere fashion. Not in a salesman,
right?
Not in that fashion. And he was.
Well, that's the most effective salesman.
Yeah, but you know
genuine.
what? He is a very effective salesman because very convincing and believable. Because, as I said, very genuine and honest. And if you met him, you get that impression immediately, and you never got the impression he was trying to sell you something. He was merely offering a service. And my mother went on to the world of real estate, and she became an incredibly successful agent. She fell into this really incredible situation where there was a builder here locally in the Twin Cities that was granted exclusive rights to develop a rather large new territory, and I think it was a couple of thousand houses, maybe, somewhere. It was a large number of homes were being built and developed and sold in this area, and my mother had it made because they had 3 or 4 model homes there, maybe, and she sat there. They were very wonderful homes that were decorated by a decorator and furnished, and she would hang out there, and they sold themselves because it was it was like the next perimeter of suburbs being built out. The city was no longer an option for development, so it was the next logical step for people to be buying homes in, and it sold itself. And my mother possesses those same wonderful qualities as my father, charming.
Did you inherit
honest.
Those qualities?
I unfortunately... if I could only be so charming, Joe, then I perhaps would be in a different occupation. But I would like to think that I myself am all of those things. Yeah, I fancy myself very charming and articulate and eloquent and elegant and graceful and honest and trustworthy, handsome beyond belief. All of those things, of course, absolutely.
Were you a happy kid?
I was a happy kid as a child. As a teenager, I was awful. I hated everything. I hated everything all the time. And punk rock, my exposure to punk rock didn't help that. Like hearing the Sex Pistols for the first time really fueled that fire. I honestly felt like I really can hate everything.
Right.
And
you felt validated.
I honestly did, and I raged constantly. I was constantly.
What was the underlying source of that hatred? Have you gone to therapy for this?
No, there is a touch of that in me, which I don't like anymore. And
was it a badge of honor for a while, or something that carried
you
and fueled
maybe,
you, motivated you?
It was just. It was anger based upon the world and the environment of the world and borders and different countries and wars based upon greed and wars based upon religions. And
were you raised in a religious tradition?
No, not at all. So I wasn't raging against religion specifically, but I was angry, and I think it was obvious, probably confused like most teenagers are.
Right.
They don't know what they're going to do and how you're going to fit in, and not maybe necessarily thrilled with the world, but none of those things are actually the world's fault or the world's problem. It's a pretty unusual. Just the earth and the world and the universe that we live in is a pretty remarkable thing, in all honesty. And occasionally now, as I get older, I need to...
When did you come to that realization?
Well, slowly, probably when I discovered The Cosmos, the show by Carl Sagan,
yes.
and realized that none of these things are really in anybody's control. And
do you believe in free will?
Yeah, to an extent. And then I also believe that there, free will and no free lunch. Very contradictory things, right? Mm-hmm. So, but I do believe at some point I came to the conclusion, and I need to remind myself this on a regular basis, that we're here. Whatever circumstances have led us to the state of existence is pretty incredible, and I have to remind myself that it's just we're here for a very short period of time, and
right.
relative to the rest of the universe, and it's probably better to attempt to enjoy what there is and what it has to offer that we potentially would enjoy, rather than hate the things that are annoying and the things that we dislike.
Tell me about how you were exposed to music.
Well, my brother and sister were fans of, in general, like rock music and R&B music. And my brother was
when were they born? In the early 60s, late 50s?
Late 50s.
Okay.
Late 50s. So it was the very obvious things, the Beatles and the Rolling Stones for my brother, and probably my sister as well. And then she was maybe also into like Curtis Mayfield and Sly and the Family Stone and stuff. So, I mean, to this day, to me, music doesn't get better than that.
Right.
Music doesn't get better than early rock and roll.
Did you go to college?
I did not.
What were you doing to support yourself?
Well, I started working at, I started playing drums at 11, and shortly thereafter, I know this sounds a bit unusual in today's environment, but I started working at a very, very early age.
Working as a drummer?
Well, no, not at all. I was working as there was a program in my junior high school for like troubled students that they could get out of a couple of hours of class to work in the lunchroom. It sounds kind of crazy to me now in retrospect.
How much would they pay you?
Ooh, it was minimum wage at the time. I want to
$1.25.
say maybe like $1.80.
Uh-huh.
And I think by the end of that, like $2.25 or something. I don't remember specifically, but I was part of the work program. And I worked through school lunch hours. So you'd rotate, like you'd work on the line actually serving up your fellow students' lunches, and you'd do that for a week, and then you would hand out milk. The milk line was a separate line. You'd do that for a week, and then you did the dishes for a week. So it was a rotation of responsibilities.
Did that reinforce any kind of like otherness that you experienced between yourself and the other students? Like that you're now serving lunch to people?
Well, you both looked at each other like they looked at you like, aha, you're doing dishes, and you looked at them like, aha, I'm making $1.80 an hour and don't have to go to social studies today.
Right.
So
well, how come you qualified as a troubled student? I mean, you seem like an intellectually curious, articulate guy.
Yeah, I mean, in retrospect, I look back at that and don't know how that happened. Today, I'm sure there are much more specific guidelines now, but all you really had to do is inquire and say, look, I'd rather work than go to my physical education class.
This episode of The Trap Set is brought to you in part by Collectivo Coffee, handmade coffee since 1993. Check them out online at collectivo.com.
So you were doing bricklayer cake, and you mentioned that you'd been working since you were in middle school or junior high. So were you still in the service industry at that point? Were you like waiting tables or something?
Well, I had various different jobs throughout my teenage years. Yeah, no service industry stuff. I managed to successfully avoid that nearly my entire life until somewhat recently, unfortunately. I thought I would avoid that successfully my whole life. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but it's my personality and the service industry don't necessarily see eye to eye, but I actually ended up in the service industry somewhat recently, and
doing what?
I was a server.
Okay.
I was a server, and I'd like to think I made an okay server. I'd like to, especially now that I don't like to compare myself to anyone, as a drummer or otherwise. But sometimes you can't help it when you're getting good service or bad service, and I look at it. And I'd like to think I was okay and I wasn't bad. I was maybe not world class, but I could serve myself, for instance, and not be upset or disappointed. I was okay. But there are things I'm better suited towards, or yeah. But no, so it was just a lot of odd jobs as a kid. I mean, I've probably had close to 20 jobs in my lifetime. One of them for 20 years. So people go, 20 jobs, well, that's quite a few, but I've had more or whatever. And I said, well, keep in mind one of them was for 20 years. I did have one job for 20 years. I had a job that started as it was a hair distribution company, which the largest distributor of hair care products in the world is based here in the Twin Cities. So I ended up working for a hair care distributor, And I did that for 20 years, for a very, very long time. So if you take that into account, that I had another, probably 20 jobs in my lifetime, and that one for 20 years. I've had a lot of various different jobs, and I stuck with things for a long time until I couldn't take it anymore and was inspired to find something better, or something better presented itself, and I moved on to that. So.
Did you have ambitions to become a rock star or a professional musician?
Oh, absolutely. I still do. Absolutely.
Well, you are a rock star.
Yeah. I mean, of course
circles.
I do. That's my, that's a daily ambition for me. Absolutely. Going back to that, thinking of my upbringing at home, sitting in the rocking chair, listening to whatever my brother or sister would put on, that was it. That's all I could. I was like, wow.
Do you think there was dissonance between kind of like the punk ethic and then your previous relationship to music, wanting to be a rock star?
Oh, absolutely. Of course, but weren't, and I don't want to bring up a lot of band names, so I'll refer to a band that we've already, didn't the
Sure.
Sex Pistols end up being rock stars?
Of course.
I mean, of course, that was the whole thing they were against, but I think that's what they became, and I think till this day, Johnny
I'm
Rotten
not even
sort of-
convinced that they were ever against it.
Yeah, I mean, so there's,
I mean, they could have gone to accounting school.
yeah, right, and I could have turned you down when you said, "Do you want to do this interview?"
Right.
I'm happy to do this interview. I mean, I'm not animately seeking like fame and fortune, but just for me, playing music and creating music is more important than being recognized for it. Mm-hmm. So if I were doing it in a basement or rehearsal space, there's still a tremendous amount of fulfillment to be had there, and that is still the most important thing to me. It doesn't have to be on stage in front of a person, or 1,000 people, or 100,000 people, or 1 million people. It's what really matters is to yourself. But yeah, I of course I wanted to be a rock star. I still want to be a rock star. Yeah, absolutely.
How did you meet Bob and Steve?
I met Steve at it was the first time Big Black ever played at the 7th Street Entry, which we're a stone's throw from the 7th Street Entry as we speak, which is also part of First Avenue, 7th Street Entry, legendary rock club here in the Twin Cities, and a absolutely fantastic place with a very rich musical history. And I saw Big Black perform there because I would go there nearly every night when I became of an acceptable age to be admitted into the club legally. And I saw Big Black, and I thought, wow, what an unusual band. And everything about them struck me as an unusual band. Like, they looked like... they didn't, speaking of rock stars, they certainly didn't look like rock stars. They didn't look like punk rock stars, which I was seeing a lot of punk rock at that time. And they just, but I remember really thoroughly enjoying that show and thinking the songs were unusual and the presentation of the music was unusual and it was really remarkable to me. But there was next to nobody there. And I would do this somewhat regularly after a show. I would introduce myself and say I really enjoyed the music. I introduced myself to Steve and told him I really enjoyed the music. And it was, it was a very simple and very short conversation. But shortly thereafter, I became a member of a local band here called Rifle Sport. And shortly after I joined Rifle Sport, we went to play a show in Chicago, which is where Steve was residing at the time. And he put us up. So we stayed with him. And, I told him that story, of course. Hey, we met not so long ago in Minneapolis. And so that was my introduction to Steve, and we became close. We became close over the years. We were friends that would see each other occasionally if Big Black were in Minneapolis or if Rifle Sport were in Chicago. And then a mutual friend of ours, who was a bandmate of mine, goes by the name of Flower. And Flower had made these solo records, and he wanted to assemble a band to do some touring with. And the band that he assembled was a really outstanding band. The members at the time were, it was Steve Albini on bass, and David Sims, who ended up playing in the Jesus Lizard, played guitar. And he had a friend of all of ours named Brian Paulson, also played guitar. And then he had me play drums, and then it was Flower in the band as well. And of course, it was his thing. He was the mastermind. And that tour was fun because Bricklayer Cake opened every night, and that was followed by the Jesus Lizard. It was the first Jesus Lizard tour ever. And then Flower would headline, and I had just quit drinking, and I think there were 10 of us on that tour. And Steve and I were the only two in that entourage that did not drink.
Why did you quit drinking?
I quit drinking because I was drinking a lot frequently. And I remember being at a local bar here that's somewhat well known called the CC Club. And I remember walking out of there with my bandmates and I. Rifle Sport had a band meeting early one afternoon. It was a lovely, incredible day, 76 and sunny or something, and we all got incredibly intoxicated, and it was dark in there and smoky and dark, just dingy, what you'd imagine the ideal.
Did you smoke too?
Oh yeah, absolutely, constantly.
Do you still smoke?
No, it was just 1 year here. I've accomplished successfully over 1 year without smoking, which is for me that's an incredible accomplishment, considering I was a very heavy full-time smoker. But we walked out of that bar, and I was loaded. I was completely intoxicated. It was like 2 p.m. or something, and I thought, wow, what am I doing? Like, I'm just drunk all the time, and I didn't even enjoy it. I just didn't. And it just started. We went from the bar to the liquor store to get liquor to go to rehearsal with, and I left the liquor store empty-handed. And everyone said, "How come you didn't get anything to drink?" And I said, "I'm not going to get any drunker today." And it was almost a comical. Everyone found that to be a comical statement. And we all went out that night. We went to the 7th Street Entry to see music. I don't remember who was performing, but I had sobered up by that time, and I had the greatest time. I was at the bar sober and watched everyone get even more intoxicated, and I thought that, wow, everyone's plastered, and I'm completely coherent and really enjoying. I was like the puppet master. I sat back and watched all of this stuff go down, and I really enjoyed myself, and that just led to the next day. I'm like, you know what? I don't think I'm going to get drunk today. And that went on and on and on and on. And
so then on the tour with Flower,
Steve
you and
I
Steve were the only two that didn't drink.
So, we would do sound check, and everyone would start to get intoxicated for the show, and Steve and I would just walk. We had a lot of long walks, and we got to be really, really solid, really good friends. And I think we really enjoyed playing music together, even though it wasn't music that we necessarily created. We were playing together, and it was, so a natural progression when his band had broken up and my band was dissolving, that we started playing together, and that was our, the beginning of Shellac for the two of us.
But Shellac started in when, the early 90s?
Yeah, it was about...
The first album came out like 94, right?
Yeah, Steve and I, we initially played together as a two-piece for a long time.
What was the creative dynamic like?
Well, it was outstanding. It was Steve, one of the most unique and guitar players in the history of rock music, and still one of my all-time favorite guitar players without question is Steve. I mean, I am I'm a gigantic fan of Steve's for a million reasons, and his guitar playing is just one of them. But so here's a gentleman that I just had a ton of admiration and respect for. I was a gigantic fan of his bands and everything he had done musically. And as a person, he's as pure and honest and genuine as they get. Absolutely. I've defended Steve. He has a reputation in the music business for being a sort of a bastard or a prick or something. It's so unwarranted. He is the most sincere, fair. Steve is the fairest human being you'll ever meet in your life. Like, this is a guy who'll do no wrong and to other people. And his biggest thing, he's very, very, till this day, with Shellac, wants to make sure that we treat everybody not only fairly, but as well or better than they've ever been treated in whatever sort of circumstances present themselves. It's important to all of us, very important to all of us, that we treat everybody very well, which is why we can continue to operate on the level that we do. Like, anywhere we've ever been in the world, people are happy to have us back because we make it easy for them to deal with us.
He instilled that in you?
Yeah, I mean, I never wanted to be, none of us had ever wanted to be that way, but it's really important to Steve. And he and I talked about how the band was going to be and behave before there was a third member, and what was good about our previous bands and what was bad, and how are we going to conduct ourselves and how are we going to behave and moving forward. And a lot of it was... So
you had a kind of unified concept
we
before
did.
The band even
It was a lot of it was
formed.
Talking.
Yeah.
A lot of it was talking about how we want to, what we want to be, how we want to be it, how we're going to conduct ourselves. And we're still careful about it. It's still half of the band is talking.
For decades.
Today's episode of The Trap Set is brought to you in part by our good friends at Revival Drum Shop. Revival is community-oriented, and they feature a one-of-a-kind collection of vintage and handmade custom drums, eclectic percussion, lessons, and rentals. They're truly one of the great drum shops of the world, and you can check them out the next time you're in Portland, Oregon, or online at revivaldrumshop.com.
Well, what was your impetus to start teaching drum lessons?
Well, that's a very long story, but I had a friend in town who had an amazing drum studio here. And a lot of people in town knew that he knew me. And he would say, hey, you've got to give some drum lessons. Like, this guy wants a drum lesson from you. Come over to my place and do it. And I'd say, no, and I'm not a teacher. I'm not an instructor. This isn't my thing. And he was a very persuasive individual and an incredible drummer in his own right. Just a really, really amazing drummer, and still is, obviously. And he started teaching, and he would constantly say, you got to start teaching. And I would say, absolutely not. I'm content doing my thing and working and blah, blah, blah. And he finally talked me into giving someone a drum lesson. I'm like, sure, I can come over and show him a few things. And I did as a favor. And it turned out I really enjoyed it, Joe. It made me think about drums in a way that I hadn't. And watching someone else play and trying to articulate to him my thoughts about drumming really opened me up to new ideas myself, and it improved me as a drummer.
Did you ever have children?
No.
So this is kind of like an opportunity to mentor other people in a way that maybe only parents get to mentor other people.
Oh, absolutely.
Sometimes.
I tell my wife and my family that now I'm not only a drum instructor, it's more like Big Brother. And it's a very rewarding and fulfilling experience, and it's to watch these kids. And in some instances, it's about inevitably I try to tell everybody, which is something all of us are seeking constantly, is happiness. And so I'm teaching them how to be happy with the level of their drumming, because some people are just disappointed and feel like they're not living up to their expectations.
Sure.
But I am, in a sense, a big brother to some of these drummers. So it's more than an instructor and student relationship. It's a friendship relationship. And it's very fulfilling and very rewarding. And I started to pursue it recently because I lost one of the greatest things in my life, my pet, my dog, Uffizi. And I had this tremendous void and absence in my life, and I needed to pursue something. So I was looking for a job. And when I say a job, I mean a job in the very generalist sense of the terms. And a few people close to me said, what on earth are you doing? Like, just looking for a mundane job? You should be doing something interesting, and you're an interesting drummer that has a lot to offer. And one thing led to another, and I decided to pursue drum instruction as a potential possibility. I had done some of it as a favor to a few people locally a long time ago, and it was very rewarding and very educational for me, myself, as a drummer. So I began to pursue that recently.
Are there any creative goals that you're not already pursuing?
I've always wanted to paint, and every few years I attempt to paint.
Just do it.
I just do it. I do. And that's you know what, Joe? That's fantastic. I'm glad you reminded me of that, because I do. And for that reason, I do. I think this is something I've always wanted to be good at. And I don't have any super aspirations. Occasionally, I aspire to become a better painter, but the reality of it is I'm not that good. So occasionally I do it, and it reminds me. I come to the realization, like, I'm just not a natural, but even to make the effort, there's some small amount of satisfaction in that to reconfirm that I'm a failure as a painter. But I still think about it, and perhaps one day I'll pursue it with a little more ambition than I have recently. But it's rare, and I haven't done it for a couple of years.
I mean, one of the things that you said earlier in this interview is that we're all pursuing happiness. Do you feel like you are a happy person at this stage in your life?
I would like to be happier, and so I work on it regularly. I honestly do. So I wake up in the morning and I tell myself to enjoy myself, enjoy the day. I have so many wonderful things in my life to be grateful for and be happy about. But, I think part of that is natural. Some people are naturally happy, and some people are naturally ornery, and unfortunately I'm more naturally ornery than I am happy. But I've gotten much better about it than I was as a teenager, certainly, and more so as I get older. And I have so many wonderful things in my life to be happy about that I'd like to think I'm happier now than I've ever been. So,
well, I think that's a good place to end it.
Absolutely.
A happy ending.
Absolutely.
Todd Trainer, thank you so much.
Hey, thank you, Joe. It's been a pleasure to be here.
The Trap Set is produced by me, Joe Wong, along with Chris Karwowski, who also edits the program. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at The Trap Set, and visit our website, thetrapset.net, to subscribe to our show for free. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please donate to our show. If you can't afford to donate, please tell a friend and give us a good rating on iTunes. Send your feedback and guest requests to thetrapset@gmail.com.